for afternoon 2. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Don. So, hello everybody. Yeah, Chris Seeger, Iowa State University. I realized you might not know what the word extension specialist means in this case, and at our university, the United States, we have land-grant universities that have outreach as part of their mission. So that's working with not just the students that come to the university and pay tuition, but also working with the communities and the public on a variety of things from agriculture to economic development and children resources and things like that. So that's part of what the extension component of this mission is at our university. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, is there an echo? Is that okay? It's good, okay. I'll talk to you a bit about some of our past projects that we've done and how those have helped influence what we're doing with community capitals. I'll explain to you what community capitals are, and then I'll talk a little bit about our tool stack that we're doing to do this project. Technically, Bailey's supposed to be here presenting this instead of me, but she had a family issue come up, so she could not attend. But she's definitely the star of the show. I'm just presenting it for her on her behalf. We work together very closely. I come up with ideas, and then she does the magic and makes them happen. But our past projects, as a landscape architect, I was involved a lot with walkability in communities and wanting to better understand where people could access and couldn't access in the communities. But we had an issue of data. We just couldn't find good data in rural communities in Iowa. And so we went out about trying to collect the data, have crowdsourcing help us generate data. And we did that, and we had this project, this grid that you see here in the top right corner. This will come back in a few minutes, but that's a 100-meter grid across the entire state that we generated so that we could use to help us do analysis at a very fine level. When we did this work several years ago, it was partial FOSS implementation. For the most part, it was enterprise. At that point, we did use OpenStreetMap and GeoJSON, but for the most part, it was ESRI type of products. As we worked with that project on walkability, we also started to look at things using OpenStreetMap and realizing we needed more data brought in that we could get. And so we started using OpenStreetMap workshops, working with the public to add that data. One project that we had, in addition to mapping out the sidewalks, were the bus stops and finding out what was the reason why people weren't using the bus more in one of our communities, the busing system. I mean, these are small communities of 20,000. They still have a public busing system, but it was underutilized. And we helped them map it and understood an increased 11% increase in less than a year by just having them move a few bus stops that had not previously been mapped. And so when we present this data, one of the other things we've looked at is using the Tableau public software. I am talking about that tomorrow in a different talk. So if you want to know more about why we're using free Tableau, I'll explain that tomorrow. All right, so our transition to community capitals. So as a landscape architect, I work with culture, I work with environment, I work with economic development, social interaction between people. Those are the things we do in landscape architecture. But I also had colleagues that were working in extension and developed this framework called the community capitals. And so in this community capitals framework, and that's about 2003, 2008 they did that. But there's 7 capitals. There's the built capital, natural, human, social, our political, cultural, and financial. And so these 7 capitals, they kind of just define what the interactions are in the community. Now, when we think of capital, like how many people are volunteering to help out, to be on certain boards, or on the city government, or the parks board, or helping out the school, okay? That's part of your capital that's in a community that helps keep these communities living and vibrant. So we looked at a lot of the indicators, the individual indicators that make up those capitals, and put those into a database system, doing a lot of analysis. I also lead a data science program, and had students working with us on that to create these visuals of different regions. And these are our counties in Iowa. There's 99 counties in Iowa. And from that recently, we did this work with the 7 capitals by county and city, in which we gave them a score. All right, so if they were green, they were doing pretty well. Red, they probably were lacking that capital, or they're kind of deficient in that area. And this is okay, except it doesn't have for us a spatial characteristic, other than it's assigned to a city or a county. we don't really know more about that infrastructure. And so with my background working with walkability, I knew that, oh, if there's a railroad track, that's a barrier, okay? How do you bring those things in, and does that apply to the capitals? And so we went about 18 months ago looking at this 8th capital and wanting to redo some of our projects. And so case study is in this small town called Ogden, Iowa, just under 2,000 people. So Iowa, center of the United States, and about middle of the state is the town of Ogden. And just for your reference, because we're looking at this map, railroad track bisects it, elementary school, kind of your Main Street business area, which a picture was of, a high school, and the single gas station, okay? This is typical of a small rural community of about 10,000 or 2,000 to 4,000 people in the state. Why Ogden? Primarily because, one, I know the community very well, but two, it has really good OSM data, okay? Most of our communities don't have, I mean, unless they're communities of, 25,000 or more, they really don't have much for OSM data, or even in enterprise GIS system data. But for some reason, our county had all this area filled in from volunteers. Someone was just super excited about street map and kept adding stuff to it. So as you can see, even our houses were mapped. I mean, this was not because it came from a government service and was put in. This was because someone looked at aerial imagery and digitized it and put this in. The sidewalks, a good portion of the trees have been put in. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to expand upon our other work that we'd done with community capitals, but looking at the small environment, demonstrate that we could do it in a small environment with the limited data that we had. But then also our primary thing was, can we do this using 100% open source project work so that in a way that we can then transfer it to those smaller communities or individuals in those communities so that they could replicate themselves and monitor and manage this and get a sense of what's going on in their community. So for the most part, our stack for this particular project, we did use some R, QGIS, OSM editor, Tableau Public, and then of course GitHub. So for the data collection, we used OSM data to grab the data, bring it into QGIS, and so we had the geometries that we needed, and then we had a lot of centroid points, we created centroids from the polygon information that came in if it was in polygon format and not in point. Categorized what the different physical features were in the community. Now, you're probably thinking, well, how do you do political capital? Political capital is one of the toughest to do. But there are different things in the community that you can look at. I mean, what do you have for voting areas in the community? Where is the city hall? I mean, is it even in a location that is accessible? Does it have a facility that allows people, the public, to come in and meet and actually listen or talk to things? Is it accessible that they can get to? Is there, a lot of these rural communities, they've got a city hall, but they only have room to park maybe 10 cars around it, So what if people really wanted to come in? Is there a venue that they could have a serious discussion and engagement with the community? So we map all these different things out in this small community here. And then as we did that, we started to bring things in and look at the scores against this 100-meter grid that I mentioned earlier. So I have this grid that I use for many different projects now. And so from the points that we brought in, and the street network that we brought in, we started to create a service area around the street network. Now we could have done this around the sidewalk network in this town as well, just caveat with that. But in this scenario example I'm showing, it's just the streets. We assumed you had a sidewalk you could walk down, but we do have that other data, but it's a different type of service area that you have to run. A lot of communities don't put their crosswalks in when they draw on sidewalks, and if you don't have your crosswalks, then you can't build a network. So that's an important piece you have to have. So we brought that in. We used convex hull to create polygon service areas from the service lines. And it looks really messy and looks like this. But when we bring that back through and do the analysis with our grid underneath, we start to get a total count within the service areas for each of the capitals. And in doing this, you can start to see that there's some hot areas within the community. And this is really good when you're having engagement with the community and you have a visual and say, well, why might this be? And you can ask them, and they'll start telling you what they think is going on in the community, what the dynamics are. All 7 of those capital scores, just by chance, for this community turned out looking like this. And again, the community composite score. Now, the railroad track that's going through there, we know that these railroads, in this community, there's 3 spots to cross the railroad track. So that's pretty good for a community this size. Just east of here is Ames, which is where the university is at. And that's a town of, 80,000, 75, 80,000. It has 4 spots to cross. So, compared, 3 spots in a small town like this, less than a mile wide, compared to the other one, is quite a difference. But the railroads or rivers, they really can bisect and change the community culture that happens. In this case, everyone knows that it might only take you a few minutes to walk across the entire town, but because there's that railroad that has 70 to 80 trains a day, okay, that's what I probably should mention. It's not just 1 or 2 trains every now and then. This is a major freight line through the state. And you could end up waiting longer at the crossing than it would take you to get all the way across school. So the kids all know this when they're going to and from the high school, because the high school is in the bottom left corner and you don't want to be late, so you just have to plan it into your day. But it does make a change in a community like this. And so the next thing we're starting to look at now, data that's harder to get, is data on housing. So we're able to get the location of the houses and the types of houses because it was put into OpenStreetMap. We could try and request this from the county, but it's weird. We talk about data ownership. That's not, it's public data. We can go online and see it, and you could transcribe the data. But if you request it, you may or may not get that type of information from the county, even though it's a public data set, because they've hired a third party to be their manager of the data, in which they have included in the fine print of their contract that they can't share it. They can only use it in the format that it's like. So to get that, we would have to buy it off that third party and not just pay for their time to convert it, but sometimes they can put a bigger fee on it. So we're still working on trying to get that because we'd like to find the value of those homes, right? The age of those homes, things like that to start to bring into our capital index. So some of the challenges that we have run into are not just related to it being a small community lacking data. And this is one of the reasons we want to work with a small community, because we want to find some of these hidden nuances that exist in data sets that if we looked at a town of 55,000, 100,000, we'd probably just miss because there's just so much stuff to look at. And so make note, this is a grocery store that was just put in. One of the things we deal with in the United States, you mentioned the census. For Australia, we of course have a census for the United States as well. And it has data at different levels. We have the US, we have individual states, we have the counties. And then within the counties, we have something called census tracts. And then within the tracts, we have block groups. And then finally, blocks. Block group data is about as small as we can get with there being any type of information. But here, that's the town of Ogden. And you can see it's a huge area. That's the government data. That's what I can get from the government. It's not going to tell me anything about that community. Now, for comparing community to community across the state, I can use that type of data. But I'm really going to need to rely on what's happening in the community and having the citizens there work with us. And so, yeah, population is about 600 to 3,000. The other thing we ran into is when we're starting to code our data in, looking at the school buildings, we looked at another building in the county in another school district, and it was coded in OpenStreetMap completely different. So when you write your script to go grab your data, you need to cast a wide net on all the possibilities that they might use to code their point data and bring it in and then go through a cleaning process. So, they're both high schools. And let's see what was in this one. Just the tags that were used to describe it were different, how it was put in. So in the first grab, it didn't show up. I mean, it helps we, like I said, we know these communities, so we can really go into the details and check this stuff and then make our scripts so they can cast this wide net. But it's an important thing to be aware of, you know, building equals school versus meant equals school. And yes, there are guidelines on how you should do this in OpenStreetMap. But it's open, so anybody can edit. And a lot of the people that edit and help provide that data, unless they are trained, are not reading the guidelines. Okay, so as part of our role in working with the communities and doing the training is helping teach them how to properly code stuff. I mentioned the crosswalks that don't get put in and why that's important and stuff. So these are those little nuances that we deal with. The missing, like I said, all that data was done in the town a couple years ago, but they missed the grocery store. The grocery store had burned down. This new one came in. No one had ever digitized it. Okay, so those types of things, if I'm an outsider coming in to do research with the community, I would just possibly miss that piece of information. You've got to rely on the people in the community to help look at the data and provide information back to you on how to put that in. And that would be good on time. So some of our next steps is we're sharing this through Tableau Public along with some of our other capitals data that we've done. What we're doing in that, since I have time, I'll explain it, is in Tableau, we're trying to make it so that the user can engage with the data. We're still figuring out the spatial part of this, but the components of the what-if scenario building. So what if we were able to increase the number, let's say, of daycare facilities in a community? How would that impact our score? Because we have other research that goes on and looks at what are some of the core ingredients that help make a community thrive, but also a community desirable. For companies to come in and maybe want to invest in a community or start a small company or families to move to the community. What are those things? And if you, as we're looking about daycares, if you only have one and the capacity is only a few kids, how can that change? So all these things are interrelated, and we're trying to build the system that does that. Looking at weighting data, and then automating the process. Right now, I mean, Bailey's had to do a lot of step by step, but that's really important because we don't want this to be a black box that you just put stuff in. We want to have it well documented how everything's working. So we are doing, even though there's some steps we could do to automate this stuff, even in QGIS, we're trying to break them down and automate them just so we can document how they're happening with that. That's a little robot that the high school made that give out candy at Halloween this year. So now they're claim to fame. The next thing we're looking at is we had to make a choice how much of this we wanted to do in R and how much we wanted to do in QGIS. And for this particular take, a lot of it we did in QGIS, but we know we could do a lot of this in R. My other developer in our office, Jay Maxwell, is a wizard at using R and geospatial stuff in that. And whenever we're working on this project, he'd come over and say, well, why aren't you using R for that? Just we aren't today, but it's nice to have options, okay, to do things in different ways. But part of it is because we think that it might be a little bit easier for some of the clientele that we are going to work with to use QGIS for the things they need to use it for. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. And that is it. I was within 19 minutes, so I guess I deleted a few more slides than I thought, but that's okay.
Heaps of time for questions.
I have a question. How do you serve out your data? Is there a server on your campus, or is it using
What the data? I mean, how are we?
well, the Tableau and all that, the results?
Okay. So that's on our results, we have those in our server. We have our own Tableau server, actually, that we put that stuff through for sharing it. I'm not sure if that's really what your full question was on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, is the data hosted on Amazon Web Services?
No, the data itself, we have our own on-premise university servers, is where we've collected it to, I guess, when we compiled it, but it comes from many different sources. And then on the Tableau side of things, we do have a paid Tableau server, but we also use the free Tableau Public to share things back out. That was being used. We had been using data sets, everything in what's the SQL program that was free prior to that. And when they changed some of their algorithms, our university went to Marie MariaDB, and so we've been using that instead of MySQL for stuff. But really, we just put a lot of our data sets in there so they're a little bit easier to query and use. Now, with when we use Tableau Public, you can't do that. So there, we're actually using just flat files. But our main frame of data set, our data portal that we maintain, had been in MariaDB. University likes to change to whichever vendor gives them the best financial deal, and currently that was Microsoft SQL. But we are probably working more into Postgres for our own stuff.
I was wondering about buy-in. Like when you're talking to people in communities, do they reckon it's questionable seeing their community on OpenStreetMap, or are they kind of excited and interested?
You're gonna get both. If you have to have you will have to have the buy-in from the community from the start when you go there, as to seeing what their data is, that there is a goal in mind to see it. If you want to really freak them out, you show them the 1-foot aerial imagery that is taken statewide almost every year, and that's just to look at corn, okay? That's its whole purpose, is to fly the state to find out how the fields are planted and stuff like that by the government. But the residual of that is we get that data, which is really good data for digitizing. So.
Hi, I'm curious about your capital algorithms for measuring those capital and how well, do those get adjusted and how well are those accepted by the communities when you?
So in the programs we've done where we've met with communities, we talk them over. We have a general list. We've looked at different indices that have been developed by colleagues over the last 20 years and used those, and those have been fairly well tested and used. The weighting of different capitals has not been, and that's something we're just starting to take a look at. And the other thing we have to recognize is the communities are different. And so the models that you make and put in for measuring capitals does need to be unique to a community. Yes, a community in Northwest Iowa is probably going to be a lot like the community 30 miles down the road. But what if that community doesn't have the railroad? Okay, there's going to be different things impacting it. So we have to look at those types of things. And when we've been playing around with AI and trying to use AI to help us tease out some of these anomalies that exist from data set and doing ground truthing to find out. So we could sit there and bring all kinds of data sources in and make models. That's fun, but you don't know if it works, right? So in our extension group, we have colleagues who are based all around the state, starting to work with them to do, I have a colleague who's a sociologist, is doing some field testing on our most recent algorithm to find out what people think about it and does this relate. But for the most part right now, it still comes down to having, on the spatial standpoint, having good data. And right now, I would say our data is fair. We got to start working with communities through another training program. They're going to have to take ownership in creating and maintaining their data. I think that's to be a key thing going forward in the United States.
That was great. Can
Okay.
I suggest that people now catch up with you after
Yeah.
tea and everybody gets an early mark? No?
Thank you.
Everyone-